is the color Bourgogne. Isn't that how you say it? Beef Bourgogne? Bourgogne? I forget how to say it. French. Welcome to Knitting My Shit Together, a fiber arts podcast, mostly knitting, where neurodivergence and yarn collide. My name is Farrah, and I can be found on Instagram at Knitting My Shit Together, and a shortened version of that on Ravelry, and I'm sure I will have something pop up that lists that, because I can never remember the spelling. If this is your first time joining, wow, are you in for a treat? I am going to do the show very out of order than I normally do because I want to talk about important things going on in the knitting community. I am also, I'm going to do it out of order, basically, is what you'll learn. If you want to see how it normally goes, you can go back and watch past episodes. If you are a returning viewer, welcome back and welcome along for the ride. Okay, so I am going to, Hamilton has joined. This is Hamilton. He's my co-host. I'm going to do the show completely out of order. I am going to start with the mental health moment because it is really important to talk about, and not only do I want to show how important it is to talk about it by prioritizing it in show order, but I also want to start off with it so that anybody watching who might disagree with my perspective or it might offend them to the point that they don't want to watch the rest of my podcast or they want to unfollow me, that they can do that without having to watch the entire podcast. That is completely your right. That's where I'll start. I'm also going to start with a slight content warning, in a way. I am going to be talking about somebody who is kind of well known in the knitting and fiber arts community who had a mental health crisis in a very public way. I am not going to talk in detailed terms. I am going to talk in general terms because that's all I know it about in, but I will say this. If you are either on the edge of having a mental health crisis, like you're feeling very vulnerable yourself, or you are brand new in recovery out of a mental health crisis, I would just ask that you use your best judgment, and if you need to skip this segment, skip it. I will put the minutes right here of when I finish it so that you can then just skip ahead to those parts. I would urge you this though. I think what I'm going to talk about is important, but I get that not everybody can listen to all the details all the time. So I would ask you to maybe have somebody you love and trust who's a safe person. If you really want the information, you could have them watch it for you and then describe it to you, avoiding language or ideas that they think it wouldn't be safe for you to be hearing right now, if that makes sense. That's kind of what I did last night, and I'll explain all that later when you hear the story. So, let's get into it. The mental health moment. Today's mental health moment is called, Who's to Blame for Your Mental Health Crisis? So, if you are unfamiliar, if you have not been on Instagram lately or don't know, there is a podcaster and knitting teacher, and he published a book. His handle is Sockmatician. His first name is Nathan. He lives in the UK, and basically, apparently, he 2 years ago or a year ago used the hashtag #DiverseKnitty, and he did a post a few days ago, last week. I can't remember all the days, honestly. They're blending into one another. So yeah, don't nail me down on timeline on this, okay? I'm just gonna go over events as I remember them and recall them and experienced them. He did a post that I saw after the comments had been shut down. I'll say that. Basically, and you can go see screenshots of the original on the highlights of A Stitch to Wear on Instagram if you want to see them and read it for yourself. And he basically did a post saying that, first off, he claimed that #DiverseKnitty, the hashtag, was his word, and that he was the first one to use it. I'll start off by saying I don't know if he was actually the first one to use it, and I'll follow that by saying even if he was the first one to use it, I don't think intellectual property works that way, and that somebody gets to say they own a word. I just think language doesn't work that way. I believe in giving credit where credit is due, but to me, him saying he owns the word is kind of like when Al Gore said he invented the internet. It kind of has the same vibe to me, and yeah. He then proceeded to say, use language that if you look at it, and A Savory Knitting or A Stitch to Wear has a really great breakdown of the language if you would like to use that. And I'm going to weave in and out of stuff here. This is going to be rambly and whatever. I don't want this to be highly scripted. I have some bullet points that I want to touch on, but I don't want it to be highly scripted because I want to speak from my heart and what I truly believe, and I think sometimes white people can be so overly cautious in what we're saying, so afraid of saying the wrong thing, that we muddle down our point and what we're actually trying to say, and I don't want to do that. But I will say this, last semester in school, I'm going to university and an English major. I took a course called Textual Analysis with a really great professor, and one of the things we talked about is we learned how to critically read and critically analyze the written word, and we learned, we talked about the idea that words matter. What you say and use in words matters. And if you go to A Stitch to Wear's highlights, there's one called Racism, I think is what it's called. I'm not sure, but they break down this entire thing with Sockmatician, and I think offer up a really good critical read of breaking down the text and the words that he used in his original post. If you look at that language, he really divided people into camps of the righteous and just and people who he deemed to be poison. And while he didn't overtly say it, the subtext was that you could read is that BIPOC folks on Instagram in the fiber arts community who are challenging the statements and action and words of other people are poison, was the subtext. His post then basically said that is not he, and that they have used the hashtag #DiverseKnitty, which he claimed to be his hashtag, in those posts, and this was his attempt to try and reclaim it. He then proceeded to put a little poem or kind of punny poem after that, the tone of which to me struck me as I read it as very condescending. And the original post, even aside from the poem, I do believe was tone policing and basically saying, why can't we all just be nice and all get along? And the reason we all can't be nice and all just get along is because that's not how oppressive systems are taken apart. They're just not. And I've been thinking of this a lot about this morning. And this is something I've really reflected on in the past, especially during the US holiday of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day. I kind of chuckle how people will put on social media quotes he used, and they're very selective about the quotes they put up. You know, they often quote his famous "I have a dream" speech, while avoiding the times he was speaking out against remaining calm. And I think we have reinterpreted, I think white people have reinterpreted and retold Dr. King's story to be one of a man who was moderate and who was avoided calling people out, avoided tension, and that's just not accurate at all. Romy Design did a great post sharing one of the letters he wrote when he was in jail in Birmingham, Alabama, where he was kind of calling out fellow bishops in the church who were asking for moderation. And I thought that was a really poignant post, and I'd read that letter before. And that's why I chuckle every year during Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day when I'm seeing white folks putting really selective quotes of his that they're sharing. It makes me laugh, knowing that I have probably done it too. I'll admit that as a white person. And I'm gonna say that I just want to share perspectives where I'm coming from so that you get the context of my viewpoint. This is going to be long, people, so just hang with me here. But I think that's what white people do to history. And so when there are people doing the same things that Dr. King did, we then tone police them and shame them and say, like, why can't you just be nice? Why are you pointing out? And it's not okay. And that falls into what's called respectability politics as well as tone policing, which is that white supremacy says, well, I don't know that moderate white liberals say, we support diversity and people of color, BIPOC folks, as long as they're not rocking the boat and calling out where we've gone wrong. Calling out, and as long as they're not rocking the boat and calling out areas that we need to improve. I think we also need to examine like the language around calling out and how we view that act. I think it was Isolde who did a post, and I'm going to try and credit the people who said these things in this talk. Isolde did a post about we need to look at how we view being called out and how actually being called out is a way to say, I know you can do better. And I agree with that. So basically from there, going back to Sockmatician's post, people in the BIPOC community and others pointed out, why are you kind of tone policing and asking people to be nice? He was doing the very thing we do in general with Dr. King. And he then got defensive. You can go look at A Stitch to Wear's highlights. You can see some of his responses. And he was defensive. And it kind of devolved his response from just denial, defensiveness, flat out rebuffing people who like would share an article, like maybe you should read this, and he was like, no, I don't think I'm going to. So just for a little context on that, sorry about that. A phone call came in from my little sister, and so it ended the video, and I'm not sure totally where I left off. I'm glad I realized it, but I stopped, I restarted, and I have put my phone on Do Not Disturb. So all of it to say, everything really devolved. And I was going to give context. So I have a friend who I trust their judgment, who is we discuss a lot of these things. They do not live in the United States, and so they live in a very different time zone from me, and they were seeing the original post as it came out. And they even commented on the original post because their perspective was that most of the posts from people were supportive of Sockmetition in denouncing BIPOC folks for being tone policey. And a lot of the posts were in agreement with him. And there were a smaller proportion that at that point were calling him out. Well, then they went to bed, and then folks in the US and Canada, North America woke up, and then, the dialogue continued. I was off Instagram a lot of that day, and then I got back on when all of this went down, and I was seeing people's stories and like, what in the world happened? So I did go to A Stitch to Wear's profile and read the synopsis and read what went on. They gave a really good summary. I will say this, if any of you are going to these people's links and to get more information, I would encourage you to do what I did and buy them a coffee to pay them for their intellectual and emotional labor. Then, the next thing that came out that I saw was that Nathan, the Sockmetician, was in the hospital. Oh, and I should say, at some point, his husband jumped into his comments and was commenting back and being equally defensive, attacking people. It was not good. The next thing that was heard was that Sockmetician was in the hospital. It wasn't explicitly said that it was for a mental health crisis that I saw, but it was there. That was implied. And that's what I knew. Since that time, I woke up this morning. It's like I go to sleep for 7 hours and then get back up and I'm like, what the hell has happened? It's reported that Sockmetician was at a yarn festival in the UK and actually physically tried to assault a BIPOC person who asked him about his stance. And there are photos of it, and he had to be physically restrained. A lot of discussions came up about mental health crises, and I want to speak to that. His husband also has a blog, and he put up a post. So just context. So this person who I know, this friend of mine, we met on Stitch Group last night, the online virtual stitching group I host that a lot of neurodivergent folks are on. Because I myself, and I had heard about his husband's blog post from Transmutation Knits, and their summary of it said that it was trauma porn, like talking specifically about Nathan's mental health crisis and the day he had to be hospitalized. So knowing that, and because I had a mental health crisis 6 months ago and was in the hospital, one of the boundaries I'm setting for my mental health is being safe about what I expose myself to. But I wanted the information to do today's podcast. So what I did was I had my friend who isn't in a place like I am in terms of just off the heels of a mental health crisis, read the blog post for me and give me an interpretation of it. Some parts they just read to me because they were safe to read, and the parts that they felt could be triggering to me, they summarized using safe language. I say all this to say that is the context from which I experienced his husband's blog post. In that blog post, Nathan's husband, flat out blames BIPOC folks and people on Instagram for causing Nathan's mental health crisis. Within the last 24 hours, when Nathan attacked a person at a yarn festival, he also blamed BIPOC folks and people on Instagram for causing his mental health crisis. So let's talk about who's to blame for a mental health crisis. Let's talk about that. That's what I want to talk about. I am going to give context for where I come from in terms of how I view mental health and mental health crises. As you may or may not know, I am first off, let's start off by saying I'm not a licensed mental health care practitioner. I am sharing these perspectives not to give clinical advice, but to share my experience and perspective as a neurodivergent person with mental illness, who considers themselves a person with a disability. I am not afraid to call myself a disabled person or a neurodivergent person, because there is nothing wrong with those words. That is me, my perspective, and how I call myself and self-identify. Everyone is different. So that's the context I'm giving this from, not as clinical advice. But I am receiving DBT, which is dialectical behavior therapy, which operates from a biosocial theoretical framework. And what that means is this. You know, the whole nature versus nurture debate, like, are people born mentally ill, or do they become mentally ill because of their experiences? And biosocial theory says it's really complicated and usually a mix of both. And I agree. That explains this. This is how biosocial theory and DBT therapy specifically view this. That many times neurodivergent folks are people whose brain biology is different and whose brains are a little more sensitive just as they operate and function in the world. That does not mean that everybody born, every child of a mentally ill person, biological child of a mentally ill person, is going to have mental illness or be neurodivergent, because impacting those is our environment, our life experiences. If we experience trauma, do we grow up with validating or invalidating parents, or in an invalidating or validating family situation or home? All of those things are factors. So it's really complicated. DBT also teaches that critique, sadness, pain, tension, awkward situations are unavoidable in this lifetime. They're unavoidable. And that the only thing that we can control is our reactions to all of that. But that we can't control it if we are in a heightened state, and that we need to learn that. So I guess this is what I'm saying. Privilege factors into this. Being a white upper middle class woman means I have a certain amount of privilege. I have access to this therapy, to these tools, to great medical care. I do not hold all people to this. This is just how I view it, I guess, is what I'm saying. Nathan has privilege being a white man. The fact that I am queer and neurodivergent does not negate other privilege I have. That's what intersectionality is all about, which I've talked about intersectionality several times previously on this podcast. Nathan being queer and potentially neurodivergent does not negate other areas of privilege he possesses, being a white man. It does not negate for either of us that we can at times act and behave knowingly or unknowingly in ways that reinforce white supremacy out of our white privilege. And it does not mean that we cannot be questioned about that, and rightfully so. And it does not mean that we do not have to give an account for that. So here's what I will say. Knowing he's, the vibe I got, the person, my friend who I talked to, has had a much more previous exposure to Nathan's podcasts and things like that. Their sense was that he has made statements hinting that mental health has been a struggle for him in the past. My belief is when you are a person in a position of privilege who has access to good care, it is your job to set healthy and appropriate boundaries around your mental health to take care of yourself. First off, the critiques of him, I do not believe were attacking him. They were asking him to explain his thoughts and ideas. It's obvious he was feeling defensive. An entirely appropriate thing, an appropriate response for him to have had, knowing I'm a neurodivergent person, I have struggled with my mental health, this is really hard for me to hear, my brain might be a little bit more sensitive to this than others, would have been this. This would have been a way he could have handled it. If I were in that situation and feeling defensive, I might have handled it this way. If something gets pointed out to me in the future, I might handle it this way if I find myself in feeling really defensive. You know, there are tons of factors that affect our emotional vulnerability. If there's a day where I haven't had a lot of sleep multiple days in a row, I am going to be more emotionally vulnerable than other days. That's just a biological fact. So let's say I'm in one of those days and I inadvertently, knowingly or unknowingly, did something on social media that reinforces white supremacy culture. And somebody points that out to me. And right away, because I'm overtired, because I'm a neurodivergent person, and I run down that day, let's just say right away I feel defensiveness rise up. I hope that I can respond this way. And I think it's okay to respond this way. I think it's okay to ask for a timeout. He could have said this, you know what? I haven't gotten a lot of good sleep the past few days. And my mental health isn't in a great place today. What you are saying is something I see as important and something I should take time to consider and respond to. But my brain is not in the space right now to do it. And then give a time limit for yourself. Say, can I have X amount of time? Like for me, I would probably say, can I have 24 hours to catch up on my sleep and consider what you've pointed out and respond to it? And then I would get back online in 24 hours and very publicly respond. That's a completely acceptable response in my mind. That's setting healthy boundaries around your mental health and taking care of yourself, but also being accountable to your community. which are both important. Physically attacking someone is never okay. It is not okay. It is not acceptable, regardless of if you're a neurodivergent person or not. And part of being have I as a neurodivergent person felt rage to the point where I could attack someone? Yes, I have. Because the sensors on my brain, my impulse control stuff, doesn't always work awesomely. But that does not excuse me doing so, ever. It is not okay. That means I need to learn how to better regulate my behavior, given that I have a brain that is more sensitive. Especially as a person in a position of privilege with access to care to help me to learn that. I will also say this. So, for example, last night, me having my friend read that post for me, that was me setting a healthy boundary around my mental health. One thing I want to say is that in his husband's blog post, he shared directly what it looked like when Nathan had his crisis in detail. I didn't read it, my friend read it, and that's as much as I know, that it was explained in detail. But one of the things that was shared that I do know is that while he was in hospital being assessed, Instagram posts and responses were being read to him. That is not a healthy boundary around your mental health. If you are in a crisis, that is not the time to be on. So it's just, that is an example of bad boundaries surrounding mental health. And that does not mean that his partner is to blame for his mental health crisis. And I guess this is what I want to say. If you're a neurodivergent person, your brain is more sensitive. You are going to experience mental health crises. It is not people asking you to be accountable to your community who are responsible for your mental health crisis. And it might not even be you responsible for your mental health crisis. Right, Hamilton? But if you have access to health care, is he responsible for the things he said that were tone policing? Yes. Is he responsible for physically attacking somebody? Yes. We are all responsible for what we say and what we do. Is he responsible for being neurodivergent and experiencing crises? He's not responsible for being neurodivergent. That's clear. In terms of the crisis, I would say this. Living in recovery as a neurodivergent person means having to set appropriate boundaries in your life around your mental health. That's what it means. That's how you do it. It does not mean that you will never experience a crisis again, but it means using tools to perhaps lessen the impact of those crises. And maybe you'll be able to, and maybe you won't. It also means we don't get to blame other people for our mental health crisis. And I'm going to be honest, when I had my mental health crisis, within the 24 hours of me having it, some hurtful things went down with me and one of my partners. Do I think some of those hurtful things kicked my brain into a mode that prompted the crisis? Yes, I do. Do I blame that person for my mental health crisis? No, I don't. Do I blame myself? No, I don't. Because up until that point, I had not known and learned tools for how to manage things. And that's what I am doing right now, learning to do that. And perhaps Nathan hasn't learned those things, but I would beseech him to learn those things. Should that same experience happen to me again, I now would handle it differently. I am able to see when my mental health, when negative thoughts, ruminations, anxiety, sadness, I can see when that is starting to begin to grow. I now have skills and tools for how to manage, to try and prevent it from getting to crisis point. Does that always mean I'm going to be able to prevent it from crisis point? I don't know. I'm not a fortune teller. But I know I'm doing the best I can. So my answer to who is to blame for Nathan's mental health crisis is no one. But my response is also this. It's not the BIPOC folks calling him out and asking him to be accountable for his behavior and actions. Here's what he is accountable for. His behavior and actions. We are all accountable to that. He's accountable. I hope he will move forward in learning some tools to manage his mental health. I hope he can come to a place where he can see, and his partner can see, the damage they have caused. I also believe anybody's capable of change. I'm just going to say that. I believe anybody's capable of change, because if I didn't believe anybody was capable of change, then I shouldn't be in therapy, period. I'm hoping that happens for them and that they are able to apologize. They're able to make amends. But that's what I think. I am going to be adding a list of international crisis lines, by the way. In the drop-down description box on my podcast, I always have crisis lines, but a lot of them are US-centric, and I'm recognizing I have listeners in other continents and countries, and so I found a link last night to a list from a website with international crisis lines for tons of countries, and I am going to be putting that link permanently in my show note in the description box below. If I have forgotten anything and left anything unclear about where I stand on any of this, please feel free to DM me and ask. If you believe that other people, if you need to unfollow me, go ahead. I am open to feedback. I'm open to critique and criticism. If I feel myself needing to step back and take a day to answer critique and criticism, I will say that. I'm also going to be moderating comments on this video. Comments that are dehumanizing to people in any marginalized category will be deleted. Neurodivergent folks, queer folks, BIPOC folks, any of the folks. I get that this is an interesting community conversation we're having, and a hard one, but I think it's important. And also, if you want clarification and to talk, I'll say this too. When this all first started happening, there were conversations I felt like I needed to have with people. And you know what I did? Instagram has video chat. I'm also going to say that, especially if you're a neurodivergent person, it is so easy for conversation to get led astray. Because when we're not connecting face to face, So I will also say, if you want to talk to me about it, please feel free to video chat with me on Instagram, to call me and I'll answer and we can talk face to face. Also, if I get feedback about something and I feel like I might need to see your face when we talk, I hope that would be okay, that I could video call you and we could talk one-on-one. Yeah, that's it. Hamilton's here for it too. I'm going to end the mental health moment here. I'm like 30 minutes into this, but I'm okay with that. I'll just maybe shorten some of the other stuff this week. Because, yeah, I'm going to shorten my shameless self-promotion. I did a shop update. If you want to see, go to my username at TomboyFemBags. And that's all I'm going to say in shameless self-promotion. I'm fine taking that part out to talk about all of this. Okay. Back to our regularly scheduled programming with Coke Zero. FOs. I don't have any. Some weeks I just don't have any, because some weeks I just don't finish stuff, and then usually the following weeks I do. And if you're a person who you need to see FOs every episode to watch a podcast, this one probably isn't for you. I do regularly have stuff, just not every episode. So yeah. Whips. Let's move on to there then. You might be asking, Farrah, if you watched previously, where's your Tanya? Where is your Tanya shawl or sweater and the progress you've made on it? And I would tell you to go look to my highlights on Instagram called Eating Crow. My Tanya is off the needles, and this is why. I publicly apologized yesterday on Instagram, and I will do it here as well. When conversations around size inclusivity came up, I talked about not featuring any patterns or knitting any patterns, specifically myself, that were not inclusive. Around that time, then Caitlin Hunter's Novelli tee came out, which is inclusive. And I saw on social media, she's Boyland Knitworks, she made comments saying she was working to improve her range. I then assumed, without checking, that Tanya was inclusive as well, and it is not size inclusive, which I discovered yesterday. It was pointed out to me when one of my good dear friends pointed out that they could not knit it because it would not fit them, and I was stunned and disappointed, and I immediately did an apology and took it off my needles. So it is sitting on scrap yarn with all the things, with the swatch gauge, with the pattern, with everything. And if and when it is ever made inclusive, I will finish it. If it is not ever made inclusive, eventually I will rip out the yarn, which is fabulous, and use it for a project that is. So that's Tanya. I did make progress on other things though. And I do have another top I'm going to be casting on. So after that, I was going to cast on Skainanigan's V-neck magpie, which was my pattern of the week 1 episode and is size inclusive. But then I started looking at all my whips that I haven't touched in a while and was feeling a little anxious about them, and so decided to work on some of those. I am going to be casting on the V-neck magpie by Skainanigan's, which is size inclusive and you should totally get. But I worked on my Sherry Chevron shawl by Amba O'Brien. This is my koala progress keeper from Whatnot. Hi, Kathy. That I love. And I'm using that to mark the sections that I have to repeat 6 times where the first one is, so that I know and can count easily. I am halfway through the increases and the increase chart. And then once I finish them because you do 6 total. Once I finish them, I will begin the decrease chart. I really love it. The yarn is the kind of burgundy color yarn, is the Claret colorway by Walk Collection. It is, I think, 100% merino. I don't know if it's superwash or not. The other color that I love is called Kitchen Sink. It is by Muse 2320 Fiber Co. And it is, I believe, on the Crane Wife base. Look at that beautifulness. I love how they're knitting up together. I love how this is looking, and I cannot wait to have it done. I'm probably going to work on it after I edit and upload the podcast. While I'm waiting it to upload, I'm probably going to open the stitch group room and knit more on it, because I'm kind of into this now. And I think maybe when I finish this is when I'll cast on the V-neck magpie. I think I want to get some of my whips done first. So that's one whip. This is my Fringe Supply waxed canvas bag in the camo fabric. Oh, and I'm knitting my Cherie chevron shawl, just so you know, on my Luca US 5 3.75 millimeter interchangeable needles. Ah! Okay. 2 other whips, socks. I'm continuing to work on my youngest child's college box o' socks. This is going to be one of the regular length socks. This is the first sock in that pair. I have about another inch to knit maybe before I do the cuff. This is Patton's Croy, blue striped rag colorway. I love it. So I've decided all vanilla socks from now on are going to be in self-striping yarn because it's a fabulous combination. Yeah, that's that. I'm doing one more shorty sock for their college box of socks. Oh, and this is a stitch marker from a progress keeper from Firefly Notes of a kitty cat, continuing my nature theme. I knit all my socks on Luca US size 1s. And this yarn is Knit Picks Felici striping sock. And this is the Grape Gadsby colorway. So this is going to be a pair of shorties. Yeah, and it's really fun to knit. So those are my whips. I'm trying to, yeah, I haven't cast on the V-neck magpie yet. I did wind the yarn just so you can see what I'm going to be knitting it with. This is Lavender Loon Yarns Raw Honey. I love it. And this is Madeline Tosh Twist Light. This is left over from my Maritimo sweater. I just want to say this about Madeline Tosh yarns. They are a problematic yarn company. This was in my stash before they made really questionable choices surrounding naming a yarn. I can't even remember what they named it, but they were then asked to be accountable for it from folks online, and their responses have been regrettable. Their responses have been something along the lines of, but my best friend is black. So yeah. I had this yarn in my stash already, so I want to use it. I will not be buying more Madeline Tosh yarn. Unless change happens. Okay, that is that. This is my pattern. Okay, that's it for whips. So let's see what we're moving on to now. You can tell I'm going quickly through the other stuff in the podcast today. And yeah, pattern of the week. Okay, pattern of the week. The pattern of the week this week is the Rift Tee by Jacqueline Cieslak of Ursa fame. You might be familiar with the Ursa sweater she designed, which is also in my favorites. Rift is $8. You can get it on Ravelry. let's see, there's a lot that I like about it. I'm just pulling it up quick on my laptop so that I can talk about it. Yeah. So, okay. First thing is, the minute I saw the pattern, I bought it. It was funny. I was in group therapy and I was on break in group therapy. We get like a 15-minute break halfway through because it's 2.5 hours long. And I actually got online and bought the pattern right there in group therapy. And after group therapy, I immediately got on the bus and went to the yarn store and got yarn to knit this, which you will see in my acquisition section, which is next. Okay. I'm going to read Jacqueline's description from Ravelry. It says, Rift cracks open all your assumptions about what a basic tee pattern should be. This lightweight bottom-up knit includes instructions for 2 necklines, optional bust darts, and custom fit bicep, which is awesome. The design features a slightly cropped body and a split high-low hem and twisted rib, giving it enough detailing to be interesting while maintaining a timeless simplicity. I love it. It looks like, I think I'm going to be knitting several of these. It looks like it's going to be a great summer tee. I really like it. So first off, one thing that's awesome about this pattern is it is inclusive in many ways. It is size inclusive. The range for bust sizes fits 40 inches to 72 inches. Obviously, you have the option of the custom arm sizing added in, and I believe there is optional bust darts too, but I'm not sure. I can't remember on that one. But it is really size inclusive, and that is amazing. It is also cost inclusive, which I love. If you go to the pattern page on Ravelry, the link to that will be in the show notes, in the drop-down description box. So just if you're a first-time viewer, I don't do extensive show notes. Instead, I keep my Ravelry projects page very up to date. So if you're ever wondering, if you're like, ooh, what was that yarn she used? You can go to my Ravelry project page and it will be there in my notebook. I do, however, in the drop-down description box, that's where I put my quote-unquote show notes. I put crisis lines for people who might be experiencing a mental health crisis or even just want resources. That's in the drop-down box, as well as people I specifically mentioned, links to their shops, stuff like that, and also the pattern of the week, the link to it on Ravelry. So if you want to see this one, go to the description box below, click on the link to the Rift Tee pattern, and this is what you will see. This is how Jacqueline makes it cost inclusive. She gives suitable yarns. So, the pattern always lists the yarn that was used in the original design, but then Jacqueline lists 3 categories of other yarns that she lists other suitable yarns. I think she uses she, her pronouns. I did not check. My bad. I should really do that. I'm going to do that quick to verify so I'm not misgendering her accidentally. It does not say, so I'm going to use they, them pronouns. Okay, sorry if I accidentally misgendered you, Jacqueline. Anyway, Rift. Okay, so they list 3 different categories of alternate suitable yarns, and they categorize them by dollar signs. They rank them from least expensive to most expensive. So I really like that, and there are 5 options in each category, which is amazing. So if you're on a tight budget and you really want to knit this, you can go look at their pattern page and get some ideas for good yarns that are less costly, and I love that. When I knit this, I don't love split hems. I don't know why. It's like a sensory thing for me. This is going to sound really bizarre. This is a mental health thing, I think, for me. When I wear garments with a split hem, I don't feel safe, which isn't that strange? I have no idea what that's about, by the way. I just don't. So, it was a bummer this winter because split hems are all the rage. And before I was making all my clothes, when I was looking for sweaters to wear, everything had a split hem, and there would be great sweaters that I couldn't get because they had a split hem, and it just gives me the heebie-jeebies to wear split hems. I have no idea what that's about. I'm sure I will uncover that in therapy eventually. So when I knit this, I also get, though, that if I just connected them and did ribbing, it might draw in at the bottom, which I don't think would be cool. So what I'm gonna do is just do a turned hem. So I'm gonna cast on in the round and just knit all the stitches for like however long the pattern asks you to for the shorter style hem, and like the one that's used in the front. And then I'm going to knit, when I get to that length, I'll purl a row, and then I will knit again that same length, and then you can just turn the hem under at the purl line, and yeah, it won't draw in then, but then it also won't curl up, which would happen if you had nothing at the bottom and we're just knitting in stockinette. That's what I'm gonna do. That's my plan anyway. If I have totally flawed thinking in that and don't realize, please somebody tell me, Farrah, before you do this, stop. That won't work how you think it will work. Let me know. Okay. So that is the pattern of the week, Rift by Jacqueline C. Slack. And you can also feel great buying their pattern and supporting them. They have come out this week with really supportive statements of the BIPOC community on Instagram, and yeah, check them out. Okay, moving on. We're almost done. I am going to close by talking about acquisitions. I'll skip shameless self-promotion, as I said. So, acquisitions this week. You're in for a treat, folks. Well, before I get to that, I'm going to do a couple other acquisitions. So this is the yarn I got to knit my Rift. I am going to knit it in Holst yarn, held double. This is their Coast, and it's the same yarn I knit my Shaker Rag top out of. This is the color Bourgnon. Isn't that how you say it? Beef Bourgnon? Bourgnon? I forget how to say it. French. Okay. This is 55% lamb's wool, 45% cotton. And I'm going to hold this double because it's fingering weight. But I love it. And I think Rift is going to look gorgeous in this. And then if I really love it, which I probably will, I'm going to knit more. Okay, so I got these, and I went directly from therapy and got these, but then I got something else in therapy, or after therapy. In therapy, I got therapy. After therapy, when I went to get yarn, I also got this. So last episode, I talked about my Simple Things summer scarf and how I love it, and I want to knit more summer scarves for myself, because I like them. You know, like this outfit, it would be really cute to add a pop of color with a scarf, but I don't want to wear the same one every single time. So, look at this. This is Malabrigo Sussurro. This is the colorway Fire Agate, which I love. And this yarn is DK or sport weight. It is 325 yards, 100 grams. And the content is 25% linen, 25% merino wool, and 50% silk. And it is beautiful, and I cannot wait to make a scarf in it. I haven't picked a pattern yet. There's a few I'm looking at. I'm going to do more research, pick a pattern, and I would like to maybe work on that soon because it would be good to have to actually wear during the summer. Yeah. So, okay, moving into the world of pins. I want to talk, hold on, I have to move my tripod to get this thing, there, okay. So there is a maker I follow on Instagram, and you should too, called Crip Femme Crafts, and I love their pins, and I saw this one and I bought it right away. They are having a sale through the month of July. It's 20% off everything in their shop if you use the coupon code anniversary. So there's a deal. I got this one, Never Pill Shame. And it's handmade, which I love. And I put this on the main bag I carry around, usually my Fringe Supply town bag. I really like it. Go check them out on Instagram, go to their shop. It's amazing. And I got this postcard by them. This is what it came on. So you can see where the pin was with their website, cripfamcrafts.com. They also included a nice little note and a sticker that I love. Look at this. My communities sustain me. Isn't that lovely? So go check it out. Take advantage of their sale. Get yourself a pin. Okay, finally, I am going to close the show by doing a reveal. So I, in the past, have tried to open my surprise subscription bag on Instagram, and it never works because of technology and blah, 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 blah. But yesterday, if you don't know, I'm in the Color of the Month Club by Forest Fiber Arts. And yesterday, my monthly skein arrived. What this is going to be is a 100 grams of her 4-ply sock, Nikki from Forest Fiber Arts, and a coordinating mini. I don't know what color it's going to be because it's different every month and the color of the month. And I'm going to open it here. And I might start doing this regularly, like every month when I get it, open it on the podcast. I think that would be really, really fun. So I think that's what I'm going to do from now on. So this came yesterday, which is hard because then it means like if this arrives on a Monday, I have to wait a week with it in a bag before I open it so I can do it on the show. Maybe what I'll do is I will start recording it when I open it and just edit it into the show. That way I get instant gratification. Okay, so yeah, this is my, hopefully, yeah. Okay, I'm gonna open it and let's see what it is. Oh my God, I love it. Wow. Okay, hold on, this is noisy, I know. Oh, I also want to say this. I had to keep my air conditioner and fan on today because it is hot. And I know it's gonna make background noise, but you're just gonna all have to deal because it is way too warm for me to not be having AC on. And hopefully it won't be too distracting. If so, I'll try and tweak with the sound as much as possible when I'm editing today. Okay. This is called, it's just the July color of the month. Holy cow, look at this. I'm gonna take the tag off. You'll all see it came very nicely wound. And I'm gonna unwind it so we can see all the beautifulness. Look, it's kind of like, okay, this is what it reminds me of. Peaches and blueberries is what it reminds me of, which is kind of perfect for July. It's like a goldy, orangey, peachy, pinky. Yeah, like it reminds me of a peach or nectarine with blueberries. Look at that. And then there's this coordinating mini. Okay, this is for sure going to be a pair of Hermione's Everyday Socks, which is also a pattern I am now freaking addicted to. Look, maybe it'll be something else. I don't know. It's so hard. I have so many skeins of Forest Fiber Arts that I need to knit up. I was gonna cast on my Samphire socks, but I'm really trying to just finish whips. Yeah. Thank you, Nikki. And it smells sheepy and lovely, and I love it. So yeah, if you want to join the Color of the Month Club, you can do that or look at any of Nikki's other lovely yarn at forestfiberarts.com. And that's it. That's all I'm going to do today. I'm already at 49 minutes on the second video. I have no idea how long they're going to be when combined. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. And I'll see you next week. Bye.